Hello everyone, this is State Representative Rob Martwick, and I'm coming to you once again from my office here in Springfield in our state capital. We're down here again in Springfield in the special session, and once again I want to take this opportunity to fill you in on what's going on, because this is a very important time. By the way, for those of you who are new, I would encourage you to go back and look through my other videos. I assure you, you won't find a lot of political spin in them. That's the straight talk, common sense solutions. It's the idea that I ran on. I try and tell you the truth. I say a lot of things that politically are not very good, and I will get people who really don't understand who will, comment with typical political, knowledge, right? So they're not really aware of the facts of the situation. They don't like hearing the facts. I don't blame them. I don't like telling the facts because they're not good. But to me, the more knowledge you have, the more power you have, the more likely you are to make good choices in your government and in your democracy, in the elections that you'll vote on. Whether it's for me or somebody else, at least you're informed. So the series of videos that I have will kind of fill you in on what's been going on down here. And you might learn a thing or two, and you're welcome, once again, to always tell me how I'm wrong with this. I'm happy to hear it. I'm not so full of myself as to think I might actually be right, but I try and give you my take on what's going on down here, again, without the political spin, without the typical talking points, getting down to the meat of the matter. So I hope you appreciate it. As always, feel free to comment, throw out your questions. Ryan is here with me. He's kind of watching this. If there's a question that pops up, he'll grab my attention and I'll try and answer it. So anyway, here we are, right? Special session, budget impasse, day 8. Governor called this down 8 days ago to begin a special session to deal with the budget. Here in Springfield, we're in day 8. We have 2 days left. So what happened today? Well, today we took up some votes on non-budget items. What does this mean? Well, there's a budget, right? A budget is simple. Everyone knows this. I even get it from people who say everyone seems to know that a budget really is simple. It's simple math. It is. And I always say that creating a budget is easy. The decisions are difficult, right? So how much revenue do you have? How much expenses do you have? Do they match? If they don't, well, then you have to cut expenses. And what do you cut? Which programs do you cut, right? Because by and large, most of the programs we've created in our state, despite what people might think, really aren't wasteful. We saw this when the governor proposed cuts. He proposed cuts to a lot of things. People said, well, why would you cut that? Well, basically because that's all that's left, right? So if you can't make enough cuts to close the budget, then again, mathematics says you have to raise taxes. Well, who do you tax and how much? Again, those are the difficult decisions, but figuring out a budget is easy. And if it's easy, despite the difficult decisions, why haven't we had one for almost 3 years? And that's really because of these non-budget items, right? The governor has said that before he will address what needs to be done to get a budget, he needs his non-budget items, or as he calls them, reforms. Now, I put that in quotes, reforms, right? Because anybody can say that what they want is a reform, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they are, right? If you watched the video I did yesterday, I would tell you that even though I'm willing to vote for it, I would suggest that a property tax freeze is not a good reform. I think I have a much better reform, but I'm one out of 177, so it's not my time to push my agenda, right? So I'm willing, as a matter of compromise, to go against what I think is not a good idea, and that's a property tax freeze. But today we took up 4 reform measures, right? These are things that the governor said I must have before I will address the budget. So we took votes on 4 measures. The property tax freeze, which I talked about yesterday. Again, just in a nutshell, what does it do? Well, number 1, it doesn't freeze your taxes. Number 2, it takes away control from your local government, which you actually elect to make these decisions. It ties their hands. Number 3, it could cause cuts to things that you might find important. And number 4, if the cuts to the things that you think are important, like, I don't know how many police officers you have, how many firefighters you have, whether or not the potholes get fixed in your street, whether or not your schools perform, right? If those things start to go bad, you might say, I don't like this neighborhood, and I'm willing to vote for a referendum, or maybe enough of your neighbors vote for a referendum, and you wind up with a bigger tax increase than you would have had if we just let the government do what it was supposed to do, right? So I think there's negative to that. But we took this up today, and I, as a matter of compromise, voted for this. In fact, I voted for all 4 of these. Workers' compensation, okay? What is workers' compensation? A lot of people don't know. Well, workers' compensation provides benefits to people who are injured on the job. Before workers' compensation was around, if you got injured on the job, your only recourse was to sue your employer. And the employer said, well, that's terrible, you shouldn't sue us. And the worker said, but we've been injured. And so we came up with a system called workers' compensation, where you don't get the benefit you would get if you sued the employer, but you're guaranteed a benefit without a big, long, lengthy process, right? And this was supposed to be good for the employer and good for the employee. Well, now Governor Rauner thinks we should make this more in favor of the employer. So what has happened in workers' compensation? Well, back in 2010, they passed some bills that went into effect and made some changes to workers' compensation reform. And those reforms actually did a number of things. Number one, they reduced the benefits that injured workers get. Number two, they reduced the payments that the doctors who treat the injured workers get. Now think about that. Less money to the worker, less money to the doctors. Well, that you would think would make workers' compensation more cost effective, and it did. So the recommended rates for workers' compensation insurance that employers have to buy went down. But here's the kicker. The price did not go down. You're wondering what's the difference between the price and the rates? Well, the price is what the employer pays. So there's cost savings built in, and the recommended rate by the Department of Insurance drops, but the price stays the same. Record profits for insurance companies that sell workers' compensation insurance right now. So we think that there's a problem there. We think that we should try and address those problems. We put together a package of workers' compensation reforms. What went into this? A lot of the requests of the governors, a lot of requests from the Republicans in the House of Representatives, and things that we think are important, like that insurance companies should have rate review. We want rate review. We want government to come in and say, wait a minute, if we've passed reforms and we've created savings in the system, those savings were designed to provide savings to the employer, not to the insurance company. It's not supposed to be a windfall for the insurance company. It's supposed to save the employer money so they can be more profitable and maybe hire more people, create jobs. If that's not happening, we want rate review. Governor's opposed to that, but that went into our bill. Again, compromise. We did many of the things that the governor wanted. Not everything, though. I admit that, but that's the nature of government. You don't get everything you want. I voted for that. Government consolidation. What does this do? Well, this says where Illinois has more forms of local government than anyone else. One of my colleagues, Sam Yingling, was on a big bend to allow rules that allow all of these coterminous, closely geographically related governments to pass resolutions to consolidate into a bigger form of government. Is that good? A lot of people seem to think so. I'm not so sure. I think it's just moving costs around. There might be cases where it makes sense, but I think there's cases where it doesn't make sense. And in fact, one of my Republican colleagues got up today and said that she knows 3 examples and she's for consolidation. She said she knows 3 examples of consolidation where it just wound up costing the taxpayer more money than it saved them. So, I don't know. It's 6 of one, half dozen of the other. It certainly makes good political sense because there's a big deal that government's bad and less government is better than more government, and this allows that to happen. I'm not so sure I agree with that either. Guess what? I voted for that one too. Compromise, trying to give the governor a little bit of, the things that he wants. Sorry, hold on 1 second here. All right, I lost my screen. Let's see if it comes back. Give me 1 second here. Gotta make sure that thing doesn't turn itself off, and here we go. Alrighty. All right, we're back. Pension reform. This is something that I worked on myself. Again, we walked into a meeting with my Republican colleagues. We sat down, we drew a list of 8 provisions. that would attempt to provide savings in the future to our pension systems, which are a problem. Pensions are very expensive. They cost us a lot of money. They crowd out spending on other things. But we also have an obligation, and we've been told by the Supreme Court that we must live up to that obligation, that we cannot diminish workers' benefits. So we came up with a package of options where employees could do things that would save the system money if they felt it was beneficial to them. For example, we're going to institute something that says if you are a current employee and you are guaranteed a 3% compounding COLA, which is one of the big cost drivers of the pension system, we've said, hey, we'll offer you an option. In exchange for a refund of some of the money that you've paid in and lower contributions going forward, right? So we will give you cash now, and we will lower your contribution rate, how much you have to put into the pension system going forward, if you'll accept a lower COLA, right? Now, is this good for the employee? Well, it's good for us if they take it. And that means it's not everything that they're entitled to. But hey, cash in hand, a lower contribution going right forward, well, that might be beneficial to some people in government. They might find that, some pensioners might find that beneficial to them. We offer a buyout for some people, or again, we'll buy out their entire pension at 70 cents on the dollar. Well, again, that might be beneficial to some, that might not for others, but they have the choice. They can keep what they have if they want it. So we did some of that, we found some savings. Again, we drew a list of 8 things, we agreed on 7 of them. 7 out of 8, that's pretty good. I voted for that. 4 things that the governor says he must have before he addresses a budget. Large amounts of compromise on all of them. I mean, huge compromise here, almost complete compromise there. Certainly 7 out of 8 is pretty good. And we went a long way on workers' comp, which is an issue that Democrats generally don't like to, that's not an area. We want to find efficiencies. We don't like making wholesale changes. But we've made a lot of compromise here. So that's what we need. What else happened, right, besides this? So we took votes on all 4 of these things. The other thing that happened was we proposed a budget. That's right, the Democrats proposed a budget. Much has been said, right? So the Senate had a budget, and today the House yesterday filed a House Democratic budget. And so I want to tell you a little bit about that, because right now we're having hearings on that budget. I left hearings that we're having. I'm going to go back over there after I'm done shooting this video, and we'll have hearings all day tomorrow, and I hope we'll have a vote on Friday. So what about this budget? Well, there's a couple of key points. Number one, it's balanced. That's important, right? It does not spend any more than it takes in. That is crucial. We have to stop the unbalanced budgets. This does. Number two, and this is important, our budget spends less, let me repeat that, less than Governor Rauner proposed spending. Did you hear that? The Democrats proposed to spend less money than our Republican governor. There it is, okay? We cut billions of dollars from the state bureaucracy, right? So we said if we're going to find savings in this budget, we are not going to do it for services that help poor, middle-class, working-class people. That's what government is designed to help. So we're going to preserve those programs. We're going to cut billions of dollars from state bureaucracy. These are across-the-board spending cuts to our state agencies. It also provides $350 million in new funding for schools. This is important. We're cutting money from state bureaucracy. We're putting money towards schools. Why is that important? Because we, as I've almost said on every video, we are dead last in terms of the way we fund education from the state level, and that's wrong. So this gets more money to there. Does this solve our problem? Not by a long stretch, but at least we're getting new money to education, and we're starting to move in the right direction. What else does it do? Well, we protect essential programs, right? So what do I mean by that? Well, we fully fund the community care program. What is this? This is a great program. Community care provides in-home care for seniors and disabled. In-home care. That means government workers go to a senior citizen or a disabled person's home a couple days a week to make sure that that person is thriving in their own home environment that gives them dignity, and it does something even more important. It keeps them out of nursing homes. And treating them in home is immeasurably cheaper than forcing them into nursing care. We're going to fund that program because it's the right thing to do and it saves us money. Number two, it protects funding, fully funds domestic violence shelters. Big cut by Governor Rauner. We completely disagree with that. That's the wrong way to go. We're going to fund that. This is one that's very important to me. Very important to me. I believe America is the land of opportunity, and opportunity for middle class and working class kids comes from access to college education. We are going to fully fund MAP grants and college affordability programs. This is so crucial. This allows kids from middle class, working class, poor families to be able to afford to go to college, to be educated members of our workforce, to be productive citizens, to have jobs, to pay taxes. This is economic development. This is the right thing to do. The governor proposed wholesale cuts to this. We're going to fund it. Breast and cervical cancer screenings, very important. Again, morally, how can you say that you should cut that? This is breast and cervical cancer screenings for people that can't afford them. But not only is it a moral issue, it's an economic issue. If they don't get screened and then they have to be treated for cancer after they show up to the emergency room, the costs are exponentially higher than early detection screenings and treatment. So it's a smart thing to do. This is our budget. That's what we presented. I'm hoping we get a chance to vote for it on Friday. That we have to. And this brings up my next slide. What happens on Friday if we don't pass a budget? Well, let me tell you. Illinois will be downgraded to junk bond status. What does that mean? Well, let me tell you something. We found this out this last week. Illinois pays annually $1 billion a year in additional interest on our debt. $1 billion a year in additional interest, not the interest on the debt. Additional interest simply because we've been downgraded so many times. That's our penalty for being fiscally irresponsible. Let me repeat that. $1 billion a year in unnecessary costs. Now, we talk about finding efficiencies in government. We talk about getting rid of the waste. That's the waste right there. Wasting $1 billion a year that you could easily avoid by just fixing your financial house is unconscionable. And that's what's happened under this governor. $1 billion a year. Can you imagine if we could put $1 billion a year towards education, or $1 billion a year towards paying down our pension debt and securing our financial future for the next generation? We could do wonderful things. Within a few years, that extra $1 billion a year could be a tax refund back to the taxpayers. Imagine that. But instead we waste it because we're fiscally irresponsible and we won't pass a budget. The lottery has told us that our participation in the multi-state lotteries, Mega Millions and Powerball, will end. They will not allow us in there because we don't have the authority to pay out the winnings. Can you imagine that? As one of my Republican colleagues said, this is killing the goose that lays the golden egg. We get about $800 million a year from the lottery, and we're about to kill it. So that's $1 billion, and when we go to junk status, that's more than $1 billion, and $800 million from the lottery. We're racking up incredible costs in the name of, get this, protecting the taxpayers. Guess who's going to pay that extra $2 billion a year that we don't have? You are, the taxpayer. We might not be able to pay for our current operations. Now you're talking about the government shutdown that's never happened. Not being able to fund our current operations, we could be forced into court order to do what we probably should have done in the first place. Raise the taxes, secure our government, stop wasting money. Schools probably won't open on time, and a big one, universities will lose accreditation. These are huge. Obviously, kids not going to school, kid at 12 is huge. State universities losing accreditation, these are some of the biggest economic engines and generators in our state, and they could lose their accreditation and close permanently. Why? Why? So that we can address non-budget items and not talk about the budget, even though we've already passed some of those. So where are we? We passed the reform measures. We passed the non-budget items. Negotiations continue. That's good news. The budget's been presented, and session will continue. But Friday's the big day. And so that brings us back to the slide I've showed for the last 3 days. It's the $8 billion question. Is 90% enough? We have given the governor so much in the way of compromise, but he continues to not understand the difference between, as one of my colleagues said today, compromise and capitulation. The governor wants us to capitulate. He wants us to give him everything he wants, and he's not willing to compromise. I'm hoping in the next 2 days that changes. He's a very smart man. He's a very successful man. I think he will come around and realize that the pain and suffering that he's about to cause our state will take generations to fix, generations. And it's not worth it. It's time for us to compromise. I'll repeat, I voted for 4 things that 3 years ago I would have never voted for. He has forced me to compromise because I want a budget. I don't want the state to burn down. I want to balance things. I want to provide, I want to make sure that kids in my neighborhood and every other neighborhood around the state have the ability to go to college, and that senior citizens and disabled people can stay in their homes. I'm willing to compromise on things that I think might be bad, but I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. I could be wrong. Maybe it'll be helpful to our state. I hope it is. I hope he's right and I'm wrong. But I made my compromise. It's time to solve the budget. Let's get a budget passed on Friday. That's what I have for today. Do we have any questions, Ryan? Is there anything I need to answer?
Why exempt Chicago on the property tax freeze?
So a big question came up. One of the things in the property tax freeze, I'm going to go back here, was why did we exempt the city of Chicago from the property tax freeze? Well, 2 reasons. Number one, as I mentioned yesterday, we have a disparate system of property taxes. Homes in Chicago currently pay 3 to 5 times less in property taxes for the same value home as they do in some of our suburbs, right? So the super high property, no one who owns a home in the city of Chicago thinks their property taxes are too low. I get that. Property taxes are never too low. We would always like to pay less than we are. And I would like to address that for everybody in this state. But for right now, the city of Chicago has massive financial challenges, and Mayor Emanuel, like him or not, has really been doing a yeoman's job of trying to address those financial problems. And given the fact that Chicago is so much dramatically lower than the rest of the state in terms of property taxes, and they haven't, I mean, they've done property tax increases, there's no doubt. I'm a Chicago resident, and I've seen my property tax bill go up. But we felt it was best not to impose that cap on the city of Chicago, to give them the flexibility to solve their financial problems. Remember, and I really, really, truly believe in this, if you cap the city of Chicago, all you have to do is drive down our streets and realize we can't even afford to provide the most basic of our services. We don't have enough police officers, we don't have enough firemen, our streets don't get paved properly, our trees don't get trimmed timely, because we're out of money. And I just don't want to see, and I think this was the will, was a stranglehold on the city of Chicago for 4 years. It doesn't make sense. We have a good process, and Chicago is unique, right? Each ward is like its own city. I mean, I grew up in the village of Norwich, 15,000 residents. A ward has nearly 50,000 or 55,000 residents. So it's 4 times the size of one village. That creates its own set of situations, and we felt it was best to give the taxpayers of Chicago the flexibility to decide through their aldermen and the people that they elect what they should do with their property taxes to handle their financial problems. So that's why they were exempted. Any other questions?
Why no 401k for future hires?
Why no 401k for future hires? Well, first of all, 401k is, they talk about that as, so the question is, why do we not have 401ks for future hires? So the answer is, well, we kind of do, right? So if this bill passes, what we would have is, we would have a hybrid plan, which means they would get a much lower pension amount, new hires, in this Tier 3 plan that we're proposing, but there would be what's called a defined contribution plan on top of that. So it would be a hybrid pension and defined contribution. What is defined contribution? In a sense, it's 401k. 401k is a private sector defined contribution. And people don't suggest, I mean, it often gets said you should have 401ks. You can't in the government. Really what they mean is you should have a 401k style investment, and that's what this provides. It provides a hybrid of both of those. We're also providing an option for current employees to opt in to a defined contribution style plan. So there is some movement in that direction. So there will be some of that. The answer is yes, there will be. Anything else?
The final question would be, is there any discussion of term limits at this point?
Any discussion of term limits at this point? No. For those of you who've watched my videos, sorry for the thing that keeps popping up there. For any of those who've watched my videos, what I would suggest is that term limits is not something that I am in favor of. It's not something that that much of my caucus is in favor of, and the reason is this: I believe it runs counter to democracy. You can go back and look at some of the videos I've said, but basically, and I'll talk to you more about this offline. First of all, you have term limits. It's called elections. If you don't like the people you have, throw them out. The average term of service in the House of Representatives is about 6 years right now, right? So 118 people in the House of Representatives, average term of service, 6 years, okay? So term limits are not needed, and I think they actually do more harm than they do good, because what they do is they make the money, and there's so much money coming into politics right now, they make the money more important than the person doing good works in the community. You throw out a guy who's been in for a few years, you put two people that have never run before, history says that the person with the most money will win. So you've just given more influence to rich people over our system, taking it away from average citizens. I don't support term limits. Term limits are not going to be part of this reform discussion. It's something the governor really likes. Again, we can agree to disagree on that, but it's not going to get done as part of this this budget. Is that it for questions? All right, that's it. So thank you everyone for watching. Tomorrow's Thursday. We're going to have a long day of hearings on the budget tomorrow. I will report back. I don't know if there's much that I will have to report, but I will check in case anybody's got any more questions. And then on Friday, hopefully we have a budget. We have a vote on a budget, and we pass a budget and send it to the governor. So that's it. Thank you everyone for watching. As you know, reach out to me through Facebook or email me at repmartwick@gmail.com, and we'll see you tomorrow.